Now that we have the basics out of the way, we can move to implementing vectors and matrices in MATLAB. I have here two row vectors, a column vector, and a matrix. As we can see here, I've delimited these two row vectors differently. The first one uses spaces and the second one uses commas. The column vector is delimited by semicolons. This matrix here uses a combination of both spaces and semicolons. For matrices, numbers in the same row, you delimit them by either spaces or commas. To enter a new row, you use a semicolon. Let's say we need to know the dimensions of a vector or matrix. We can use MATLAB's built-in function size. When applying this, we get two numbers, the row and column dimensions. We usually deal with indices and dimensions being given to us as row, column. So the output of size gives us the row dimension first and the column dimension second. You can store these output values a few different ways. The first is defining a single variable as the output, which will give a variable containing two values. Or we can tell MATLAB to store them as individual values. Suppose you need just the length of a vector or matrix. You can use the function length. Something that may confuse you somewhere down the line with using length on a matrix is remembering what dimension it returns. We can see from this line that we get the row count from using length on a matrix. It's safer to stick with using size on a matrix in the future, but you can still use it on a matrix. Performing vector or matrix math is super easy from here. All the mathematical operations you see applied to scalar values can also be applied to vectors and matrices, but there's one small difference. For multiplying two numbers together, you would use just a single asterisk, but for vectors or matrices, you need to include a period operator. This rule, or syntax, is required for dividing and performing exponentials as well. To successfully multiply vectors together, they must be the same size. This goes for matrices as well. Next, we're going to talk about linearly spaced vectors. Suppose you need a vector with 100 numbers from 1 to 10. How can we tell MATLAB to make this without manually entering each number? MATLAB has a built-in function called linspace that creates vectors with specified start, stop, and size values. The syntax is pretty simple. The first value is where you want to start your vector. The second value is where you want to stop your vector. And the third value is the amount of points you want in your vector, which will turn out to be the length of your vector. Now suppose you need a vector from 1 to 10 with a step size of 0.01. We can use the colon method, which is similar to linspace, except here we input start, step, stop. You may be wondering, when do I use one or the other? The most common applications I've seen for linspace is when you know how many points you need in your vector, and the colon method is most common if you know your step size. If you need help understanding linear algebra, I highly recommend watching Khan Academy. These videos are very helpful, and I'll put a link in the description below. I've also created a bunch of script files you can download off of my GitHub. Link is also in the description. There you'll find working examples of how to use everything we've covered in this video.